Learned that 6 people have died after 2 helicopters collided mid-air in Brazil. Among the victims is a popular singer, Oliver Tree. It happened yesterday morning in Rio de Janeiro.
The people who make the world laugh are often hiding stories the world never sees. That's part of what makes Oliver Tree so fascinating.
Tree was in the helicopter with 4 other people, including a popular YouTuber from Argentina. Investigators say one of the helicopters crashed into the parking lot of a car dealership. You're seeing that video there of that wreckage and crews working.
For years, audiences have known him as the eccentric artist who turns everything into a joke. But beneath the chaos and comedy lies a very different reality, one shaped by rejection, frustration, and battles that can't be solved with a punchline. And at 32, that hidden side of his journey is impossible to ignore. The body that took 3 days to name. On the morning of June 14, 2026, 2 helicopters were flying low over a neighborhood called Recreio dos Bandeirantes, out on the western edge of Rio de Janeiro. It was just before 9 in the morning, and people were starting their normal day. Then those 2 aircraft collided with each other directly above a car dealership that had been built on the grounds of an old abandoned church. They came down together into a lot packed with electric vehicles, and the moment the helicopter carrying Oliver hit the ground, it exploded. What happened next made everything worse. Because those cars ran on enormous lithium batteries, the fire that erupted simply would not go out. Around 20 vehicles caught flame at once. Thick black smoke poured over the rooftops, while firefighters struggled to even get close enough to do their jobs. 6 people had been inside the 2 helicopters, and every single one of them was already gone before help could reach them. Now, here is the part that genuinely chills me. For nearly 3 full days, the authorities in Brazil could not confirm that one of those 6 bodies belonged to Oliver Tree. The fire had been so violent, so complete, that there was nothing left to recognize, nothing a human eye could identify. So the medical examiners were forced to send a request all the way across 2 continents, back to the United States, asking for his dental records. On June 16th, forensic experts working inside the Medical Institute in central Rio carefully compared those records to what little remained, and only then did they say it out loud. The last of the 6 victims to be identified was the American singer Oliver Tree Nickel. His father did not hear it from the police. He heard it from a music producer in Brazil who had been recording songs with his son only days earlier. When journalists reached out to the family, his dad replied with a single devastating sentence. "Peace be with Oliver," he wrote. "The family has no comments." And somehow that quiet line carries more grief than 1,000 headlines ever could. But the truly bizarre thing, the thing that turned this from a tragedy into something almost unbelievable, is what the rest of the world did the moment the news broke. Because instead of mourning him, an enormous number of people online flatly refused to accept that he was dead at all. And the reason why goes right to the heart of who this man really was. The death nobody was willing to believe. When the first reports started spreading, something happened that you almost never witness when a public figure passes away. Thousands upon thousands of his fans simply did not believe it, and they were not in shock or denial the way grieving people usually are. They were genuinely convinced, with total certainty, that he had faked the entire thing as one last enormous prank. And the unsettling truth is that they had every reason in the world to think that way. You have to understand the kind of person Oliver Tree had trained everyone to expect. For nearly a decade, this was a man who lied to his audience for sport. He had announced that he was quitting music so many times that people lost count. He had staged dramatic retirements, then casually released a new song 2 weeks later. He had played dead inside his own videos, treating his own funeral like a joke he could not wait to tell. He had spent years blurring the line between performance and reality until almost nobody could tell where one ended and the other began. So when the news of an actual helicopter crash arrived, his fans reacted exactly the way he had spent his whole life teaching them to react. They laughed it off. They assumed it was fake. Comment sections filled up with people swearing he would resurface within a week, grinning with a brand new album and a smug little smirk, having fooled the entire planet one final time. Then the conspiracy theories crawled out, and they got dark in a hurry. People dug up an old music video of his and began insisting he had somehow predicted his own death. Completely fabricated stories spread claiming that a cartel had been involved. Crash footage from entirely different disasters, from a collision in Malaysia and another one over the coast of Australia, got passed around and labeled as if it showed his accident. Professional fact-checkers eventually had to step in and prove that most of that footage was years old and from the other side of the globe. To understand how a living man could possibly convince the world that even his own death might be a lie, you have to understand the strange and brilliant machine he had spent 10 years quietly building. The genius disguised as a joke. Most people only ever knew him as a meme on their screen. The blunt bowl cut, the enormous baggy jeans swallowing his legs, the tiny kick scooter he rode around on like a confused 12-year-old, the thin mustache. He looked like a dorky stranger who had stepped straight out of a faded photograph from the 1990s. What almost nobody understood is that every single detail of that look was deliberate, and underneath the silliness, it was honestly a kind of genius. He invented that whole character while he was studying at art school, and he was not joking around when he did it. He actually wrote a formal thesis paper, a real academic project with the title, How to Turn Yourself into a Meme. He was not stumbling into fame by luck. He was dissecting it like a scientist in a laboratory. He studied the cruel way the internet builds people up only to tear them apart. And rather than hiding from that machine, he decided to climb inside it and drive. He would become the most mockable, most ridiculous, most punchable version of an online star imaginable, all on purpose, so that you would laugh at him, share him everywhere, and never once suspect you were being played like an instrument. He explained the idea to an interviewer in a way that has stuck with me ever since. He said he never wanted the music itself to be funny. The music was always sincere. The character was just a costume he wore on top of it. The entire point was to reveal the enormous gap between how a person appears on the outside and who they really are on the inside. Never judge a book by its cover, he was practically shouting at us, while deliberately wearing the most absurd cover any human being could possibly invent. And the strategy worked better than he ever could have dreamed. The songs that came pouring out from beneath that ridiculous costume were not jokes in the slightest. They were aching songs about loneliness, about feeling hurt, about standing completely alone inside a crowd of people. Millions connected to that raw pain without ever realizing the goofy man delivering it had engineered the entire disguise specifically to slip past their defenses and reach the soft part underneath. But that costume came with a terrible price that he may not have fully understood when he put it on. Because once you spend years training the whole world to never take you seriously, you slowly lose the ability to ever be taken seriously again, even when your actual life hangs in the balance. He had built himself a beautiful and clever trap, and without realizing it, he was standing right in the center of it. And the strangest thing of all is that death was never just a one-time gag for him. It was a subject he circled back to over and over again, almost as though some part of him could not stop reaching toward it. The strange obsession he could not shake. Long before any helicopter ever lifted off the ground, Oliver was quietly, almost compulsively, fascinated with the subject of death. He spoke openly in interviews about studying Buddhist practices, specifically the old traditions where a person deliberately prepares their mind for the end of life so that it stops feeling so terrifying. He said he leaned on comedy to shrink death down, to make it seem smaller and less frightening than it really is. In one of his most famous videos, he literally appears holding his own decapitated head, singing away as though losing your life were the most amusing thing in the entire world. He turned his own ending into entertainment again and again. He faked going into retirement more than once. He presented multiple albums as his final goodbye, his last words to the world. When one interviewer gently pointed out that every project he released seemed to be framed as the end of everything, Oliver pushed back and quietly insisted that it was not simply an act. And then there was the will, which is the detail that truly stops me cold. Only about 2 months before he died, he sat down for an interview dressed, of all things, as a big green cartoon ogre, and he calmly laid out exactly what would happen to his fortune once he was gone. He said his own family would not receive a single penny of it. Not one. He said every dollar he had earned would flow into a foundation built to fund art for young creators, the ones he affectionately called baby geniuses. And then he delivered the line that I cannot get out of my head. He said that people will finally appreciate his stupid videos and his stupid songs once he is no longer around, because that is the moment people decide to appreciate you, the moment you are gone for good. He was right. He was so painfully, unbearably right. Now hold on to something, because I need you to feel the full weight of this the way it landed on me. In February of 2026, only 4 short months before he died, he released a song called Flowers. In the music video, he plays a pilot. He stands on the ground in between 2 helicopters. And with a straight face, he sings the words, "Put flowers on my tombstone." 4 months later, 2 helicopters collided directly above him and ended his life. For all the laughter and all the disguises, the final year of his life was quietly brutal, and the vast majority of his fans had no idea just how badly things had been falling apart away from the cameras. The nightmare. Hiding behind the costume. In April of 2026, he went online and detonated his own career on purpose. He announced that the album he had been building was canceled, and that he was walking away from Atlantic Records, the major label he had been tied to for 8 long years. He refused to soften it or dress it up in polite language. He flat out called the entire experience nothing short of a nightmare. He explained that after generating tens of millions of dollars for that company, they no longer wanted to support his real art because he would not crank out short, hollow, throwaway songs built purely to chase quick popularity on social media. He felt used. He felt thrown away by the very people who were supposed to believe in him. When he announced that the album was dead, the fans who loved him refused to let it stay buried. They pushed and they demanded, and they would not let it go. And so, only a few weeks later, he released that album entirely on his own, through his own tiny independent label with no giant company standing behind him. He had recorded pieces of it in more than 80 different countries, stretching across every single continent on the planet. It was the most ambitious creation of his entire life, and for the first time in years, he made it as a completely free man. For one brief and beautiful stretch, it genuinely looked like a comeback story for the ages. The troubled artist finally breaks his chains, seizes back control of his own work, and does everything exactly his own way. He was about to attempt something no musician in history had ever managed to pull off, a feat that was meant to crown everything he had ever built. And not a single person watching could have guessed that this very triumph, this once-in-a-lifetime dream, was the exact thing that would place him inside that helicopter. The world's first world tour. In May of 2026, riding high on his newfound freedom, Oliver announced the single most outrageous idea of his entire career, and for a man whose whole life was built on outrageous ideas, that is truly saying something. He called it the world's first world tour, and the scale of it was almost impossible to believe. He was planning more than 70 shows, spread across more than 30 countries, touching all 7 continents on the globe. He talked seriously about performing in China, in Japan, in South Africa, and incredibly, even in Antarctica, down on the frozen bottom of the world where hardly any human beings live at all. No artist had ever truly accomplished a tour quite like this. It was exactly the kind of beautiful, impossible, slightly insane dream that only a person like him would ever have the nerve to chase, and he came roaring out of the gate. The tour began at the very end of May in Mexico City. From there, he traveled down to Santiago in Chile, then onward to Buenos Aires in Argentina, then to Sao Paulo in Brazil. He was sweeping across South America, one packed show after another, finally living out the dream he had fought his entire life to reach, completely free of the company that had held him back for so long. After the Sao Paulo concert, he made his way over to Rio de Janeiro. He was not even there to perform that day. He had gone simply to make music and shoot videos alongside local creators, doing the thing that brought him more joy than anything else on earth, creating for the pure love of it. His next scheduled show was supposed to take place in Lisbon at the start of July, an entirely new continent waiting just over the horizon for him. He never made it there. He climbed aboard a helicopter on a bright and ordinary Sunday morning, stepping into the very same kind of aircraft he had casually played around with in that Flowers video only months before. And somewhere up in the sky above that peaceful neighborhood, in the span of just a few seconds, both the dream and the man came crashing down together into a parking lot full of burning cars. The tour that was meant to rewrite history ended in the most tragic way anyone could possibly imagine. And that ending leaves us with one final, deeply uncomfortable truth to face together. The cruelest joke he never got to tell. Oliver Tree spent 10 years patiently teaching the entire world never to believe a word he said. He lied for laughs. He faked his own exits. He turned his own death into a recurring punchline until the boundary between the joke and the truth dissolved completely. And he performed it all so masterfully, so relentlessly, that when the worst imaginable thing actually happened to him, thousands of people refused to grieve at all because they were absolutely certain it was just another stunt. And maybe that is where the true tragedy actually lives. Not only in the fact that a 32-year-old artist died with so much brilliance still left inside him. Not only in the fact that he died chasing the most ambitious dream of his entire life. The deeper wound is that he spent so many years hiding his real self behind a costume that, when the end finally arrived, the world genuinely struggled to mourn the actual human being underneath all of it. The boy who turned himself into a meme had succeeded so completely that people forgot there was a real beating heart hiding behind the joke the entire time. He had been telling us exactly who he was from the very beginning. He simply tucked the truth inside silly videos, oversized pants, and a ridiculous little scooter. He sang about crushing loneliness and feeling like an outsider while every one of us laughed at his haircut. He showed us the gap between the cover and the book, and he begged us over and over and over again never to judge one by the other. We just refused to listen until the moment had already passed. And now the only thing left for any of us to do is finally take him seriously in exactly the way he predicted, at exactly the moment he warned us it would happen, now that he is no longer here to witness it. Do you think the world ever truly saw the real human being behind the costume, or did the joke he built end up swallowing the man whole? Share your honest thoughts down in the comments below, because I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know where your heart lands on all of this.